It's now time to think about presenting this design on layout sheets. There are already a number of layout sheets here, but I want to show you how to create a new one. It's Format and Layouts, and this dialog box pops up. Pick the little icon up here at the top left, New Layout, and you'll notice the record here goes blue. And since in the metric world most landscape designers would present on an A2 sheet, we'll select this line here and then pick from quite a long list of preset sizes, although you can choose a custom size. We'll pick an A2 sheet, and mostly people would want to work it in album format, so landscape format. So we'll say OK, and now if we OK that again, you'll notice down here in the status line there, it's the line below the drawing editor, is a term layout 2, and you now see what was in model space has been transferred to this layout space. I'll right click and zoom extents, and I might now want to rename that. Notice how these other sheets have a name, so I'll right click on there, go to the layouts manager and just change this. You can notice here I had a layout 1 that I was doing when I was rehearsing this, and it's got a cross by it because I've deleted it. When I save the drawing and come back in, layout 1 will disappear. But we'll call this Site Plan and Planting, for the want of a better term. I'll just edit that. Now we're right, and we'll OK it. So the name should have changed. Why didn't it? Layouts Manager, click in there, Site Plan, hit Enter to burn that in, and now the name changes. What you've got on that layout sheet is what's referred to as a floating viewport. So if I select the edge of that viewport, that's in a sense a window into the whole design. What I'll now do is right click and activate that viewport. And you see now what we have is a rectangle that can be positioned however we want over any part of the drawing. Just for the moment, and just for the purposes of this demonstration, we'll put our sheet over that area. So I can then right click and say display on the layout. Then right click again and deactivate the viewport. So you can see what I've done. I've now changed the window that looks at the design. What I'm going to do now is jump back into model space. By clicking here, what I'm going to do is just move the plant schedule. Say from there, I've got ortho 1, get it out of the way a little so I can separate out various parts of the design. I'll even separate out the design for a wall hanging, which is down there in the bottom corner, a rather nice piece of design work. So now when we go back to Site Plan, I can select the floating viewport again. I might take the opportunity here to sort of slightly increase it to move it to near the edge. You can actually go over the edge if you want, and then right click to activate the viewport again. We can bring the size in a bit and just adjust like so, and right click display on the layout and deactivate the viewport, and there we are. We have, if you like, a full size view of the plan on an A2 sheet. Now that's not how we would want to present it to the client. What we'd want to be able to do is have our planting information on here so that the client could identify the plants. And I'll show you how to do that in the next phase. So we'll just stop recording here and do some further reorganization, and I'll get back to you. In order to present this design on the sheet as we would like a client to see it, we need to change this floating viewport. What I'm going to do is to bring it across, or bring the frame across like so, and that'll leave space for our plant schedule on the right hand side here. So I'll activate the viewport again, and this time I need to increase the size just a little, like so, and then display it on the layout. So now I'll deactivate that. We now have the whole of the design showing there. I think in a moment we'll be able to increase that a little, but what I want to show you is that you can add a viewport. We want a viewport to hold the plant schedule. So we'll set it up like so. And now when I click on that and activate the viewport, you can see we can now make a new floating viewport like so. If we make it slightly bigger, I'll zoom in there, we can fit the ground cover. We can slide that down a little, and in a moment we'll put a different view. I will move that design around, but just for the moment that will do, and display that on the sheet. Then deactivate the sheet. I'll jump back into our model. I'll move this one here, move it well off to the right. It's now out of the way. We'll go back to our site plan, right click and zoom extents. So here's our plan, there's our first schedule. We'll clean things up in a minute. We'll right click and say we're going to add another viewport down here where we'll put that design for the wall hanging. So let's activate it and make our mask, if you like, sit over that, and then display that on the layout. So, and then deactivate that one. So we now have the views that we want. I'll turn off the grid because we don't need the grid at this stage, although you might well use the grid to make sure the frames line up the way you want. On the subject of frames, what we can do is change the colour of the frame to white so that it won't show. That should be one of the last things you do, because what we're interested in, or we should be interested in doing, I think, here is to pick this frame. We want that to be pretty much as large as we can get it. I'm not unhappy about the width of our plant schedule. I think that's reasonable. We can overlap them if we want to get a bigger space. So we can do that sort of thing. Then activate that viewport, come down here so that we encompass that area, and then display it on the layout. We'll deactivate again, and you can see we've come a little too far. A number of ways to handle that. We could pick this one and just move it so that it's out of the way, and you can see we could fit. I'll deactivate that one, sorry. Hit escape there. What it would be worth doing is moving the ground cover schedule underneath the plant schedule so that we can fit these in better. So you can see it's an iterative process. If I get hold of this and move, we can move that and sit that underneath there, and when we go back you can see whatever's in model space here, let's zoom extents, will automatically be reflected here. So it's looking fairly good. You might want to move this floating viewport like so. I think it's probably better down there, but don't forget we will need an area for our logo and details of site location and so on, so we might well tweak this a little more and move that one up. So let's just make the edges of the frames here. If I hold my shift key down, I can do that on all of the floating viewports, and I'll pick colour and I'll make it colour 255, which is this colour here, and we'll unselect all and zoom extents, and there's our sheet looking quite respectable. We need a little bit of fine tuning, but we're starting to display various parts of that design on the sheet the way you would like to display that or show that to your client. I'm sure you can do a better job than I've done here, but I'm trying to make the movie and move things around as I go, but I'd be relatively happy with that. What I will do in a moment is print a PDF version of that and incorporate that in the notes so you can at least have a look at a high resolution version of this. The designer has made it clear that she wants to include a floating viewport. Let's just select it now if we can. There's a floating viewport, and I've put into the model one of the images of a rendered part of the design. That's the outdoor seating area. So let's go back to the site plan. The other thing that she has stressed is that she wants to be able to print or be able to label it. Down here will go the logo and site details and information, but that she wants to put a scale, a fixed scale. If we select this frame now, you can see that I can actually type, I can say this is going to be a fixed scale yes, and a scale of 50. So you can actually, if you take it back to no, you can type whatever scale you want. If I change that to 100 and hit enter, you can see the whole magnification drops out, the zoom factor drops out. So she wants a scale of 1 to 50 on an A2 sheet and wants that to be fixed. So we'll just hit the escape and deselect that. So when this sheet is printed A2, we can faithfully or happily label it scale 1 to 50. So I'll attach a little later a video, or join a video onto this one where we'll look at putting a title block and information about this site down in the bottom right hand corner. But you can see here, if I just select all of these, we've got a number of floating viewport frames, and one of those frames has been set to a fixed scale. The next stage is to put a title block, which we'll cite down in the right hand corner. You can do that easily by going to the library and details and scrolling down and finding title blocks, and this is where we'd expect you to put your own title block. But here let's take the standard one delivered with gCADPlus and insert into this drawing, and we'll put it in as a scale insertion point we specify, and the scale will specify on the screen. So in goes our title block, and what's happened here is that there's a gross imbalance in scale. So we need to pick up that block, right click and scale, and we'll scale it by a factor of 10, and that's still much too large, so we'll scale again by 0.5, so we'll halve the size, and that's about right. So you can see you can play with scale and size of objects quite easily. We'll line things up. You might even put a temporary line in. Draw line, say from there down to there, put ortho on or polar on, and you'll notice that the line is being drawn in the current line type, so it would have been more sensible for me to have changed that line type into continuous. And what we can now do is select move, and we can jump in here and move that and line it up with the edge, and we could do the same above. That offends me a little, so I'll select it. Whoops, display there. What I did was to pick and deactivate that. What I did is pick the wrong viewport, so we'll erase that line. So now it's just a matter of filling in detail on the sheet. We want the client's name to go in there, the drawing file name, issue if it's issue A, B or C. We've got a copyright notice, we need to change that from 2011 to 2014. So let's explode that, pick up the piece of text, pop in here and just change that to 2014. So we now have an editable block, title block down there ready to roll. We can move that across and neaten things up. I might want to put a logo in there and a correct email address and so on. So we've got plenty of room for a description of the job. So we'll zoom extents, and that pretty much completes things for those I'm sure you can do. and I will do in a moment, is mock up a much more effective and informative title block. And here is the final result, the A2 sheet. What I might do is just take off our properties box, our layers box, and even our command line so that we get a better view of the whole drawing. I'll zoom extend. You'll notice that when I zoom extends, the border of the floating viewport prevents me from maximizing my view. So I could go zoom window and just put a window inside there. So now we're looking at the design. So we have our plan view here, exactly at a scale of 1 to 100, the entertaining area, design done, taken, the base plan taken from our plan here, put into SketchUp, then rendered, and an image from SketchUp brought back into here. So the two programs are working together. The wall cutout section that'll be placed on the screen wall in here, the detail of the plant schedule are there. Now, should we want to change the plant schedule, we can go back to the model, zoom extents, and it's a simple matter to say copy another plant. Let's choose an example of where we could do that. We could say we're going to copy this plant from there, 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 and there. In other words, we're increasing the planting in there. It looks a little too regular. You could use the feature that introduces some variation there, but that particular species corresponds to Malus domestica, so there's a row of apples there, and you'll notice that we have 3 of them there. So we have a tool in the plant tools to update the plant schedule. So we update, and now our numbers click up to 6, and that's a really, really useful feature. So I hope that shows you a lot more about how to put together a final sheet. And remember, you can have as many sheets as you want in this design. We've got somewhere a model for the bird bath sculpture which we could put on another sheet.